Hi guys, and welcome back to Pass and Move. And for today's episode, rather than I was so used to saying game that I was going to say game instead of episode, but it's actually just an episode of our series, the Premier League series, that be it. Team guide and tactics, of course, covered for Manchester United, the team that we're going to be doing today, the Red Devils. 12th team in the Premier League in terms of alphabetical order, so we've covered all of these teams so far. And if one of these teams are yours that you're hoping to get some advice for, don't worry, we'll cover it soon enough. But today, Manchester United. So, of course, a very interesting team to manage. Just want to quickly go over, why it might be an interesting challenge to take on Manchester United. Of course, they're finally back in the Champions League, so that's very, very interesting in and of itself. But at the same time, they haven't won a title since 2012 and 13, so you do want to bring them back up there. Champions League football is no longer a good thing. You might need a season's time to sort your team out, but in truth, you should be aiming for the Premier League title, and I think you have a good enough squad for it. But yeah, did finish last season in 6th. It's been a bag of mixed seasons for Manchester United so far, but the aim of winning them another Premier League trophy will obviously go really far. You want to restore them amongst the European greats. You can set yourself the target of winning the Champions League as well. But in truth, you just want to try and go back to dominating the league. And if you ask me what dominating means, it means just like here, winning it 3 times in a row. And of course, you do want to try and get a bunch of homegrown talent, like always. But the truth is, you just want to try and extend this as much as possible to really get away from some of for example, like Liverpool have won it 18 times, I think. So you just want to extend that record and really rub it in as much as possible. You could do with some more League Cup wins as well. FA Cups are decent, but maybe I think Arsenal have broken that record, so that's another thing you can keep an eye on. But managing Manchester United, of course, is an interesting prospect in trying to win them their first Premier League title. Might get a little bit boring after that, but restoring them amongst the elite would be a good way to play the game, I suppose. So, bearing that in mind, one of the first things I like to do in terms of my team is actually go into my staff. Obviously, I try and sort them out as much as possible, but we're just going to base it on what we have here today. I try and find the best staff member who I can trust in terms of judgment of ability. So the looks of that is that my assistant manager, Roy Faraya, God. Anyways, this guy is the best judgment of ability amongst my staff. The problem is, it's not so much of a problem really, but he's just been at Manchester United since 2016, so that's not too much time. It's only been a season, but he should know the players and he should be able to judge their ability well enough. And so we'll be using him as our measurement guy, I suppose, for our players. Another thing I like to do is actually head down to the under 23s and under 18s. Just quickly go to the filters, include them in the squad, and just see if there's anyone actually ready for the first team squad. So by the looks of it, maybe Timothy and Pereira. Nah, he's a championship player, but it looks like they'll be soon enough. Probably next season they will return as Premier League players. So I just like to have a look at the under 23s, under 18s, see if there's anyone ready for the first team. It doesn't look like it at the moment for Manchester United. The other thing to do though is look if there's anyone over age. It looks like it's just Sam Johnstone, but he's gone out on loan anyways. So it looks, at least, we haven't really done anything here, but at least by the looks of it, your under 23s and under 18s don't have anyone that is not necessarily needed in that squad. So now we can go back to the first team, and one of the things I like to do to try and see how I can get the best out of my team and what tactic I should go for is actually sort out my players according to their ability. The good news is that my assistant manager is the judge, so I think these reports are from my assistant manager anyways. But sometimes if you're relying on your head of youth development, you might not want to go by the star rating. You might actually want to go to players one by one. But I feel like we can trust this, and we're going to try and make a best 11 out of these players here. So we've got Paul Pogba, De Gea, Juan Mata, Lukaku, and so on. And just having a look at the team shape, I suppose, or the amount of players in the squad here, the positions out of these best 11 players, apparently it looks like you might be best, just like most of the top teams. It looks like you're suited to a 4-2-3-1 formation. You might have a bit of an issue because you've got 2 strikers who are just about the same ability according to the report here. But the good news is that, of course, Ibrahimovic is out for 6 to 7 months. I know that's not necessarily amazing news, but at the same time, that means that now it helps with the whole trying to make a 4-2-3-1 formation. It just seems to make most sense. So it looks like Pogba, Herrera, Matic. You could possibly go for a 4-3-3 as well, but you wouldn't be making best use out of Mata and Mkhitaryan, the attacking midfielders. If you look at, you have to kind of also have a look at the overall squad and see what they're built for. And just basing on that, it looks like you really could go either way, a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. And that's kind of how Jose Mourinho has built his squad in real life as well. They kind of alternate between both formations. But in terms of ability, it looks like the strength is mostly in the 4-2-3-1 more than the 4-3-3. So, keeping that in mind, we can actually now try and see whether we've got the numbers that are needed for the season. So if you ask me, you always need 22 players for any season, especially if you've got Champions League football. So United have got 25 here. The question is, are the numbers in the right areas? Are they in the right positions? We need 2 players per position. One player being the starting 11 player who's a leading star or world-class player, and then a backup player who's a youngster with a ton of potential. That's just kind of how I like to have my balance for the squad. So in terms of goalkeepers, we've got 2, so it's good that we've got the numbers at least, but the question is, do they have the quality? And David De Gea definitely has that. He's a star player for most Premier League sides, according to Conan Little, but we do want to base it on Roy. So yeah, he's obviously perfect candidate for you. It's a bit strange that he's not a world-class player in truth, but maybe that will change as the season goes. But he will be your first teamer, and that's all that matters. Sergio Romero, Argentinian international, is a very decent backup. He's got plenty of experience. He's a good fit player for most Premier League sides. The question is, do you want to decide to move him on and bring in a good backup goalkeeper, a youngster with potential who can eventually overtake David De Gea and compete with him seriously? Because at the moment, Romero, who's considered just a good player for Premier League sides, he's not really going to compete with David De Gea at all. And he's 30 years of age, 70k wages, 13 million. If you're ever going to sell him, now is the time to sell him. But yeah, obviously it is, like I always say, up to you guys. This is just, my advice and giving you as much options as possible. Right backs, you've got Darmian and Valencia. Darmian is a good player for most Premier League sides, but Valencia obviously is the first teamer. He's better than Darmian, and he's a leading player. So once more, you kind of have this depth question that you need to ask yourself. Since Valencia is the first teamer and Darmian's only considered good enough, he's 27 years of age, Italian international, prime years. Do you keep him as a decent backup, or do you try and invest in a young right back who has plenty of potential? They have to be ready for the Premier League, but bear in mind, you don't just bring in any youngster who ends up being a Sky Bet League 2 player, but obviously is like a wonder kid or something. That's kind of pointless. You have to be ready for the Premier League as well. So that's what you have to ask yourself. Do you want to invest? Do you want to sell on and move on Darmian? 45k wages is not bad at all for a backup player. He is highly valued though, which is a little bit strange. A bit of a versatile player as well, so kind of questions that you have to ask yourself. Do you like his attributes? Do you like his mentality? If you ask me, what I normally do is actually move on Darmian and try and anyone I consider who's if you ask me, I would move on the players that I'm telling you, like Darmian and Romero and stuff. Those players I do move on and try and bring in youngsters with potential. I feel like it brings a better depth to the squad and more competitive and players that are suited to your tactics as well. So Darmian, for example, he's only a defensive fullback. You cannot expect him to do anything moving forward, and that might be a bit of concern for a team like Manchester United, who definitely need flying fullbacks in truth. So we just have a quick look at the team report, because like it says here, there's not a great deal of quality depth outside of the first team players. So that's what I'm trying to give you options for and point out to you, is that these backup players might not necessarily be good enough. Centre backs though, we've got Rojo, Jones, Tuanzebe, Smalling, Bailly and Lindelof. So it looks like you've got excess numbers, and it is a bit of a concern, to be fair. But you seem to have players who don't necessarily need to be here. So it looks, by the looks of it, Tuanzebe isn't ready for the Premier League, and it says so here. So we're going to move Tuanzebe down to the under-23s. Best bet is to sell it, not sell him, sorry, that's a bit excessive. Move him on loan, and then hopefully next season he comes back as a good Premier League player. But in terms of the current players, it looks like your best two are Bailly and Lindelof. Lindelof is a leading player and Bailly is a leading player as well. So that's your first two players sorted out, your starting 11 sorted out in terms of centre-backs. The question is, out of these three, who do you move on? So Rojo is out for 4 to 5 months. He'll probably make it just before. He'll probably return just before the winter transfer window. So do you try and survive without him and sell one of these players, or do you keep them and try selling them in winter? So obviously Smalling is only a good player, Jones is a good player only as well, and Rojo is a good player as well. So these three backup players of yours are not good enough. You also have to bear in mind, I feel like one of these are expecting first team football. Nope. Alright, so that's good enough. But Rojo, nah, he's a rotational option, but he's a bit on high wages, 110k wages. So another question you have to ask yourself is, Jones and Smalling, if you move them on, how does that damage your homegrown talent? They are England internationals after all. But of course, again, if you're asking me what I did, I do have my own personal Manchester United save. I moved on both Smalling, Jones and Rojo, and I brought in youngsters with potential. Rojo you can't sell until January, of course, but I kind of just let him be. I brought in one youngster with potential, sold both Jones and Smalling, and then just let Rojo survive until about January, and then I moved them on, and then brought in another youngster with potential. So that's kind of how it is in terms of your centre backs. You have definitely one excess number, because obviously the decision's up to you whether you want to keep him on until Rojo comes back. Bear in mind, Rojo's injury is heavy, a torn knee ligament, so even when he does come back, he's not going to be fit for quite some time. Left backs, you've only got Luke Shaw. You do have the option of playing Blind there, but if you ask me, Blind is not a left back. He does have the attributes for it in terms of playing on defend duty, but let's say if we want him on attack, he doesn't have the dribbling, flair, pace or acceleration, and especially in the modern game when you're facing tons of wingers who have lots of pace, acceleration pace is actually quite important as a fullback in the modern game. Off the ball movement isn't too great either. If you ask me, he is best in the deep line playmaker and defensive midfield. And so that's where we have to consider. So you've only got one left back, Shaw, out and just for 3 weeks to 2 months, so you don't need to try and bring in anyone on loan to replace him or anything. For Rojo, that's definitely an option, by the way. If you do sell Jones and Smalling, you can bring in a youngster potential and then also bring in a loan player who's just filling in for Rojo until winter time, and then move on the Rojo and move on the loan player and bring in another youngster potential if you're afraid of the numbers. Shaw though is only left back, so you definitely need a player. The question is Shaw good enough for the first team, for the starting 11? He's definitely good enough for the squad. Problem is, he's susceptible to injuries, but he's got tons of potential. And by judging just based on his stars, it says he's very suited to Premier League football and he can improve significantly. But if you ask me, just judging on stars, he gives me the feeling that he's actually just a good player. But this is where you have a bit of a decision to make. Do you bring in another youngster with potential who can compete with Shaw, and that way you have two left backs who are young and competing with each other for first team football for a starting 11 spot? Or do you bring in a ready-made left back? If you ask me what I did, I brought in a ready-made left back, leading player for the Premier League, and Shaw had to deal with being a rotational option for a while. He's a first teamer in terms of squad status, but he didn't complain. He fought his way through, and I think within a season's time he will actually be ready for first team. And that first team player that I did bring in will just have to be okay with playing rotational option. If not, I can move him on. I already have a first teamer, no worries, and just bring in another youngster. But obviously it's up to you. If you feel like Shaw's on too high wages and good of squad status, you can definitely bring in a youngster with potential. He will cost you less as well. Also, investing in a fullback spot is always difficult in terms of finding a leading star or world-class player there. Not only are they rare, but they also do cost a ton of money. So that's really where you have a decision to make. In terms of central midfielders, looks like you got plenty. Carrick, Blind, Matic, Fellaini, Herrera, Pogba. So those are 6 players then. You only really need 4. The question is, are your players good enough? So Carrick is only a decent player for most Premier League sides, so it's definitely someone you need to move on. 35 years of age, his contract ends as well. It's going to be very tough to move him on, but his wages are 80k as well. You could probably put that to better use. The problem is selling him, of course. You might be able to loan him off, maybe. His contract ends anyways, so maybe you might want to consider leaving him on for a season, but he'll just be making excess numbers, because the truth of it is that Pogba, star player, Matic, leading player, Herrera, leading player, they're going to be your main midfield in truth. Even Herrera is going to be a backup player by the looks of things. Fellaini is just considered good, and Blind's just considered good. So if you ask me, move on Carrick, Blind and Fellaini, and then bring in a young central midfielder who who can play as backup with Herrera to Matic and Pogba. And that's kind of the strength of the squad. I think Herrera, he's expecting first team football, but he should know with Manchester United investing so much in Matic, the likelihood is that he's not going to be getting too much first team football. And I think the way I played him, he was happy with rotational football, so maybe you could try and do that for your squad. But there you go, at least in midfield that's sort of sorted out. Young, a winger. Let's talk about attacking midfielders let's talk about the front four. So you got these players here will make up your front four out of the 4-2-3-1, the attacking midfield, the striker position, and the wings, of course. You've got 8, which is technically the correct number of players needed if you have 2 per position. But again, like I always ask, are they good enough? So Young's only considered a decent player for most Premier League sides. You should definitely move him on by the looks of it. 31 years of age, on incredibly high wages, and he doesn't suit the 4-2-3-1 formation so much so in terms of him being a natural there. Apparently he's more of a left back or a right back, and we've already got, maybe you can have him as a left back, but he wouldn't be much of an option in truth, and he's an inverted left wing back on the left flank anyways. So if you ask me, just move him on. Not worth keeping him among the squad. Not only is he not a leading player, he's not even a good player. He's actually just decent for the Premier League, and that's more for bottom teams of the league. Your Manchester United is supposed to be the top, so aim for better standards. So you can assume Young's out of the equation. You do want to try and play the best 4 players here, and that is Mkhitaryan, Mata, Ibrahimovic, and Lukaku. But bearing in mind our formation and how long Ibrahimovic is out, it makes more sense to actually just play another winger instead. So we will be trying to play Mkhitaryan and Mata together. Mata's very comfortable on the left flank. He can play as an advanced playmaker, trequartista, inside forward. He's got decent acceleration and pace. Not the best, of course, but good enough to play as an inside forward if needed. Rodamantor, he's got the attributes for as well. Winger, not so much, especially because he is left-footed. He does have the attributes for it, though, to be fair to him. It seems the way we're playing, he would be better suited as an inside forward. So that leaves us with where is he? Mkhitaryan as well as the other attacking midfielder. He can play as an attacking midfielder, shadow striker possibly. I think he did that role in Dortmund as well, and he does cut inside from both wings. So really, in truth, you can try and play Mkhitaryan on the right if you wanted to, and Mata in midfield as well. But if you ask me how I played it, I played Mkhitaryan down the middle and Mata on the right. And that leaves us with Lingard, Rashford and Martial on the left flanks. So too many players in truth. But yeah, I mean, you kind of have decisions to make. So we already know Mkhitaryan and Mata are good enough. Lingard is a good player and he has a hint more potential. The question is, with his age, will he actually reach a leading player status? Rashford and Martial are also, of course, plenty of potential. It doesn't make sense. I feel like one of them's leading. Martial probably is the leading player for the Premier League side, especially because he's a hint more better than Lingard, and Lingard only needs a bit more potential to actually become a leading player. Also, considering the competition you have, you've got 2 great youngsters competing with each other for first team football. Kind of just doesn't make sense to invest in a leading player here. You'd only be hindering either one of these players' potential. So you can consider Rashford and Lingard untouchable, the same way that Ibrahimovic and Lukaku are untouchable. So really, it's all about the attacking midfield spots and the right wing spots. So in terms of attacking midfield, I like to actually have played Lingard as a shadow striker. I feel like he does that role decently. He doesn't have too much strength or long shots, and composure is a bit of a weakness, but everything else for him suits him quite well, and he did the role very well for me. Also, we're playing inside forwards, so playing him on the right, even though we do need a winger, just doesn't make sense. Doesn't really necessarily suit our tactic too much. So we will be playing him as a shadow striker instead. I gave him a season's time. I think for me, he did improve to a leading player, but he might not necessarily do that for everyone. So if he doesn't, you can eventually move him on. But considering he's an academy product, a homegrown talent, English player, international, very high valued, not on too much wages to be fair, he would be a decent rotation option for you, a backup to Mkhitaryan. So that means you've only got one winger in terms of Mata. So you do want to invest in a backup winger, and someone who can overtake Mata, especially as he is 29 years of age, and try and find an inside forward who has a bit more pace and acceleration than Mata. But for me, Mata did an incredible job. He even cuts inside from the right wing, comes deep to get the ball. tries to kill a ball often, all that sort of business. He suits the inside forward role. For me, at least, it worked well, and that way I get to play Mata and Mkhitaryan in the same side. So that's kind of the real areas, if you ask me, that you need to invest in. You need a left back and you need the right winger, just for the sake of numbers. Everyone else is just more of a squad depth issue, and depending on who you want to sell, who you want to move on, and where you might want to bring in players. But first things first, the first things you have to do: left back and a right winger. So in terms of the tactics, this is how we are playing, a 4-2-3-1. With the pass and move type of football. So we've got control, we've got structured, short passing, tighter marking, and an offside trap. And I think I've showed this for a number of my videos. I think for the top teams it kind of suits them best, but Manchester United naturally can play these type of roles quite well. So this is the eventual tactic you want to work towards if you're playing pass and move football. If you ask me, actually, you can even go with a sweeper keeper on attack duty, but unfortunately for us, David De Gea isn't a sweeper keeper. But other than that, all these roles suit us well. So to play a pass and move type of football, you need roaming players, you need players who dribble a lot, you need creative players, players who play risky passes, and in that sense you've got everyone there. So you've got wing backs who cross from the byline, which is needed. They dribble a lot. We need plenty of crosses from deep in that sense. Inside forwards dribble naturally. They play risky passes as well, more so than the wingers do, and that kind of suits us a bit better. Shadow strikers have good movement. They move into the channels and they play risky passes and dribble a lot, so that suits us plenty. Complete forward on support does the same thing. They hold up the ball for the team, dribbles more, risky passes, and roam from position, so that's why they suit us. And the roaming playmaker, of course, dribbles and roams from position. We've got just a ball-winning midfielder. Doesn't necessarily suit the tactic as a whole in the sense of, they don't dribble a lot, they don't play too many risky passes, they hold their position. But the key thing why we're playing a ball-winning midfielder is that they tackle hard, they close down the position, more, and they hold their position. And so they're the only midfielder out of all these players here who are really going to be doing the dirty work, and you need at least one player doing that. So we've gone with the ball-winning midfielder. And that's kind of it. And so if you're asking me why I play on control, you can play on control or attacking because you are one of the top teams in the Premier League. And if you're asking me as well why we're playing on structured, I feel like I don't like to play with too many team instructions. So playing with structured kind of goes hand in hand with that. I like the players to do their roles individually, and that's why I'm playing structured. Gives a good team shape as well. I feel like if you have a ton of team instructions, then you should be playing with a fluid team shape. That's just my understanding of it, because when you play a fluid team shape, you can literally see your team attacking and defending together, and that's different to playing in a structured shape. So it kind of makes sense that you have a bunch of team instructions, because your team are playing like a team. So that's kind of it. But yeah, shorter passing kind of explains itself, because we want a pass and move type of football. You can't play directly in that sense. Offside traps just for the sake of the team shape and not getting caught in behind, and tighter marking helps with the ball winning midfielder who is closing down, and we need someone who's tackling harder, so that kind of makes sense. If you're asking me who to play in each position, David De Gea, we should have set the first teamers in truth. We've got Valencia here, Bailly and Lindelof. So Bailly is going to be a central midfielder. Lindelof's comfortable as a ball playing defender, so that suits us. We're going to assume Luke Shaw's your first team left back, because that's all we've got at the moment. Matic is going to play as the ball winning midfielder, and Pogba as the roaming playmaker, and I'll explain just in a second why. We've got Mkhitaryan as an attacking midfielder on shadow striker role, Mata as an inside forward, and Martial as an inside forward on the left, and Romelu Lukaku as a striker. So if we just go back to the tactics, we can talk more about each individual player. So Lukaku isn't necessarily too comfortable, but as you can see, the average role suitability is quite decent for our team, and it's not too bad. It can definitely do some improvement, but considering, I just want to say, I've won the Premier League title in my very first season with Manchester United using this starting 11 and using these tactics and instructions and all that sort of business. So you should be able to do it as well. The only difference that is not showing on the screen right now is the squad depth that I had. I was a bit ruthless with the team, and that's kind of it. In fact, I started the season with a different tactic entirely, and it started to perform poorly because the opposition started to figure out its weakness. But when I started to use this performed well for more than half a season, really well. I actually saved my season. I managed to win the Premier League with it, and yeah, they couldn't figure out the weakness to this formation, I guess, or this tactic, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, so Matic not naturally a ball-winning midfielder according to his role stability, but he can do the role really well. His deep line playmaker apparently is what he likes best. But the truth of the matter is, as a ball-winning midfielder, he is excellent as well. Just look at those attributes. The only worry is acceleration. But if you are bringing a backup youngster who plays as actually, Herrera is going to be playing as a ball-winning midfielder, and he's another player who it's not his natural role, but he performs there really well. So if you just have ball-winning midfielder, look at those stats as well. It doesn't necessarily, might not be their most comfortable, but it suits the tactic more, and we don't have room for a deep line playmaker in truth. So Matic can do that quite comfortably. Pogba, advanced playmaker apparently is his best, but of course we don't have a tactic that suits it. Maybe if we're playing a 4-3-3, it might suit it a bit more, but then again, not necessarily. Deep line playmaker is his second best thing. He can do that support role quite well, but the truth of the matter is we need someone who roams. And considering his physicals, his mentals, his technicals, all that sort of business, it seemed to make sense to make use of someone's vision and passing, and at the same time their physical ability. And so we've gone with the roaming playmaker. He's also got good first touch, long shots, passing, finishing, all that sort of business. So it's just to try and bring out the best out of Pogba, and he did this role for me excellently as well. Mkhitaryan already talked about shadow striker. Lukaku's best according to the game as a target man, but that doesn't suit our pass and move type of football. Of course, if we play him as a target man, the ball's just going to be lumped forward to him. If you ask me, in truth, his attributes might suit more of an advanced forward or even a poacher for that matter. Doesn't have too much acceleration, but his pace is really good. But for us, complete forward on support, he's got very good attributes all round. The only thing that might need some work is vision. I'm hoping that will still improve a little bit. And his backup, Ibrahimovic, can do the complete forward support role quite well. Lukaku did really well for us in that role too. And unfortunately, he's just a bit unlucky that we're not looking for a target man on support at all. So that's kind of the all-round tactics overall. We can talk about some things very generally. We did the tactics and team guide, to be honest, but team report already talked about squad depth. The staff could do with some improvement. The good news is that you've got the best recruitment team in the division, but your physios and your coaching staff need some work. Training, I like to have it on high intensity during the preseason and then average during the season. Main focus is always balance for me. I've messed around with it a couple of times in truth, but I feel like balance just gives the best platform for my team. Match preparation is always on match tactics during preseason, but during the season itself, I just go with whatever my scout tells me. Schedule, you've got some decent friendlies here and a decent number as well. I like to go with 6 friendlies, but I feel like you could maybe do some better improvements and maybe even go on tour. You are one of the top teams, you've got tons of money, so you could definitely go on tour. Bayern and Barcelona, though, will be making some interesting opposition, but otherwise, these other teams are kind of pointless to play with. Competitions, you're expected just to qualify for European Champions League football, and you can definitely do that with your first team. Add some squad depth and you should be able to win the Premier League just like I did. Champions League quarterfinals, very doable. You enter in group stages anyways, and with the squad you've got, it's a decent aim to go for. Might be a bit high for the first time being back in the Champions League for a little bit, but you know, you kind of have to just make the board happy there. European Super Cup's not important, but it'd be nice to add a trophy, especially against Real Madrid. FA Cup finals, FA Cup, you have to reach the finals, what I'm trying to say. You enter the 3rd round, so you do have some work to do, but the League Cup is not important apparently, but, you know, adding to the trophy cabinet there is always a good thing, so don't dismiss this competition, I suppose. Scouting, they've been revamped. You've got a ton of money, so really you should be, in terms of the packages, on World for both the senior and youth packages. Your recruitment team has too many numbers in truth, so get rid of them eventually, and you can afford to give plenty of money to your scouting budget. In terms of the actual budget though, we can have a look here. You don't have any ins or outs. You do have some clauses that you could buy out maybe and save yourself some money in the future maybe. But yeah, in terms of the transfer budget, 42 million, not the most out of the top teams. I feel like when we covered it was Liverpool who had the most in the first season, but he did spend a ton of money already, so just keep that in mind. If you ask me what I like to do, I like to have it in the middle, leaning towards the transfer budget, so you kind of have more of 30 million, and that way you have 600k wages in wages basically that you can afford to give to anyone that you actually do bring in. Considering you're only bringing in 2 youngsters, possibly the left back and the right winger, 30 million should do the job. And if you're moving on some excess numbers that we pointed out, you should have some more transfer budget and wage budget for that matter. And in terms of finances overall, you got 336 million. So the truth is, you can go all the way and still be safe. But yeah, 336 million is as good as it gets, to be honest. The problem is you've got a ton of debt. The good news is that you're paying it off slowly, 3 million about, or 4 million per month. You should be able to do it quite easily. Just keep an eye out on your wage budget. And the wages that you're offering your players up until this is gone. I mean, obviously it's 10 years time, but it's just something to keep in mind. Projection though is really good, of course. Your balance will improve steadily and incredibly, really huge turnovers. Profits should increase. I feel like it drops one season for some strange reason, but as long as you're not spending stupidly, and with the squad you've got, you might have a good balance if you improve the squad depth, and then after that these type of transfer budgets you won't necessarily need, so you'll be saving your team money. But yeah, 117 million is always good to have, isn't it? Under 23s and under teens, we already talked about no one being ready for the first team, but who maybe you should keep your eye out on, if you ask me, is you've got quite a number of them, to be honest, from Mensah to about Pereira. There's plenty of players here. Any of these can become first teamers. The good news is Timothy Fosu-Mensah can become a ball-winning midfielder. Dean Henderson's a sweeper keeper, for example. That might suit the tactic a bit more. Arno's a Mezzala, which doesn't suit us, but maybe he can become something else for your team, like a shadow striker possibly, since he loves to have some finishing. He might improve in the other attributes as well. Spanish youngster. Ethan is a defensive fullback, which might not suit us best, but maybe his attributes can improve and you can move him into a wing back. Leo Connor is a wing back by trade, so that seems to work well. He's not really a central defender in truth by the looks of his attributes. It's a bit weird. But yeah, even wing back's not too good for him either. Angel Gomez, inside forward, that seems to be the best thing at the moment, either footed. His attributes read a little bit strange as well, but he's got plenty of flair, which could prove useful. He's got acceleration, pace as well. Dribbling is really good as an inside forward. Vision, passing technique. The truth is, he can play as an attacking midfielder if you were playing as a advanced playmaker, but we're playing if you go with an attacking midfielder or a shadow striker, he doesn't do too well there, not too much strength, so maybe play him as an inside forward if he eventually becomes a first teamer. Roshan Williams, just a standard central defender, decent attributes there. Heading's a bit of a worry, tackling as well. It's kind of a weird set of attributes, to be fair, but that's kind of how youngsters are. And Pereira as an inside forward, you might have to sell off Andres Pereira if you ask me, to be honest, because you've already got Rashford and Martial playing there. Maybe if you eventually do move Ibrahimovic on, for example, and move Rashford or Martial as a striker instead. If you ask me, though, they're better suited as inside forwards. But if you do move them into a complete forward role instead, then maybe there would be a spot on the team for Pereira. But maybe you might be better off just moving him on. Send him out on loan until his value is incredible, and then just sell him for that ton of money there. But yeah, that's kind of it. I feel like we've covered everything in terms of tactics and team guides. So if you did enjoy today's episode, then please do, of course, hit the like button and subscribe for more daily Football Manager 2018 content. And as always, guys, thank you all very much for watching.